Hello. So in this video we're going to talk about Menander's play Aspis, or the Shield. So I don't necessarily have a tremendous amount to say about this play, largely because it's so fragmented. So we get this with a lot of Menander's plays. There are a very small number that mostly survive, that you'd say 60% or more. Then there's a couple of them, Aspis and Perikenomene, which I'm going to do a video on shortly, where you'd say maybe 40 to 50% of them survive, and then there's a bunch that just smaller portions of them survive. So, according to the editors for this Oxford World Classics edition, at the very beginning of this, it says, of Aspis, it says, "The first two acts of this play are fairly well preserved. The beginning of Act 3 survives in a mutilated state, but much is lost. Of Acts 4 and 5, we have enough to make a tentative reconstruction of the plot." So basically the entire last half of this play is virtually gone. There are individual words, small phrases, but especially in Act 5, not even enough in large portions of it to make a coherent guess about what happens. That being said, because the play is so fragmented and so difficult to follow, the Oxford editors have given us a pretty good plot summary. So I'm just going to read you their plot summary so you can get a sense at least of what this play is about. It says, a young Athenian, Kleostratos, who's been serving as a mercenary in Lycia, which is in southwest Turkey. His old tutor, Daus, who has accompanied him, returns to his home in Athens with the news that he's been killed in action. He brings with him a massive booty won by his former master and carries Kleostratos' battered shield. Smicernes, Kleostratos' uncle, a miser, at once begins to scheme to get hold of this booty. He plans to do this by marrying Kleostratos' sister, who will inherit her brother's property. And then it says in parentheses, in Athenian law, an heiress who had neither a father nor a brother living could be claimed in marriage by her next of kin, close parentheses. But she's already engaged to Chaereas, the stepson of Kerastratos, who is Smicernes' younger brother. Daus proposes a scheme to outwit Smicernes. Kerastratos is to pretend he is desperately ill. A friend of Chaereas, disguised as a foreign doctor, is to examine the patient and declare that there is no hope. When Kerastratos is dead, Smicernes will give up the idea of marrying Kleostratos' sister and transfer his attentions to Kerastratos' daughter, a far richer heiress. This scheme is put into action, and we see Smicernes convinced by the doctor that his brother is dying. The text then becomes fragmentary, but we may guess that Daus continues to tease Smicernes and that he decides to marry Kerastratos' daughter. In Act 4, there are fragmentary indications that Smicernes agrees to that Kleostratos' sister should marry Chaereas. Then Kleostratos enters. He is not dead at all, but captured by the enemy and has now escaped home. Act 5 perhaps shows Daus relating that Kleostratos and Chaereas are to marry their respective brides. The cook is probably summoned to prepare a wedding feast, and Daus and the cook may have combined to punish Smicernes, compared to the ending of The Bad-Tempered Man, close parentheses. That's Dyskolos, which I've made a video on previously. You should be seeing a link for it in the top corner there. So, Aspis is an interesting play because it depends on a series of dramatic ironies. So, dramatic irony, for those of you not familiar with this specific term, is when an audience knows something that a character doesn't, or another character knows something that one character doesn't, and proceeds as though, and the character who does not know proceeds as though they know the truth. So, what we get in Aspis, we actually have a first scene before the prologue, which is a thing that Menander does periodically in order to give the audience some background information before we get to the actual prologue, which sets up the action. So in the first scene prior to the prologue, Daus arrives back in Athens with gold, booty, slaves, etc., etc., and he encounters Smicernes, who again, Smicernes is Cleostratos' uncle. He's a miser who wants to inherit this gold himself, when he learns from Daus that Cleostratos is dead. Now, when we get to the prologue, which is spoken by the goddess Chance, she starts out by saying, in response to what's just happened, if some disaster really had occurred for these poor souls, then it would not be right for me to come on next, since I'm divine. And so that's about sort of avoiding the pollution of the dead. But as it is, they do not know the truth. They're all at sea, but if you put your mind to what I say, you'll learn the actual fact. Now that last line there is kind of speculative. So the phrase, you'll learn, appears in the manuscript, but to what I say, you'll learn the actual fact. The rest of that is speculative. But this sets us up for the dramatic irony. These two characters think that they know something. I'm going to tell you the truth. The goddess Chance, I'm about to tell you what's actually happening. That fatal day, the man they think is dead was with another man, a friend who shared his tent. The natives suddenly attacked. The trumpeter kept sounding the alarm. Our men rushed out to help, seizing the arms which were to hand. And so the man who shared with Daus's master answered the alarm, armed with this shield. It's the shield of Cleostratos. He fell immediately. And since the shield lay there amongst the dead, and since the corpse of the young man swelled up, so Daus was deceived. Cleostratos rushed out from there bearing the other's arms, and he was made a captive. He's alive, and very soon he'll come back safe. Sorry, there's a motorcycle going by. Well, then you've learned enough about that business. So, in the prologue, which again comes after Daus and Smicernes have set up that Cleostratos is dead and his gold and plunder from this campaign are up for grabs, Chance then tells us, actually, none of that is the case. By the end of the play, Cleostratos will be back. You, the audience, now knows that. None of the other characters know that. So everything that proceeds up until the point where Cleostratos returns is functioning under dramatic irony, because the premise is now that all of these characters' actions are predicated on something that we, the audience, know to be untrue. Then the rest of the prologue, for about 35 lines or so, Chance gives us some background on the characters. She helps us sort of understand the relationships and the different marital aspirations between these different groups. And she essentially tells us what's going to happen in the play. She says, at the end of Smicernes, he won't succeed, but cause himself a lot of toil and trouble and reveal to all the world what sort of man he is. So right from the beginning of the play, we know what's going to happen. It's just a question of watching it unfold. And so, again, this idea of dramatic irony, we've seen this in a couple of Menander's other plays. It's something we don't really get that much of in Aristophanes, who's the great poet of old comedy, but it's something that's very significant in the new comedy that Menander is writing, and that will continue to be significant along the life of comedy.